In one corner, we have Russia, a nation desperately trying to recapture the glory of its past as a superpower, but largely succeeding only in further alienating itself from the global community. Nonetheless, Russia still possesses a formidable military and continues to invest in cutting-edge weapons, even if it often lacks the resources for full-scale production. In the other corner, we have Germany, a nation known for its industriousness and technological prowess. German engineering is renowned worldwide, and many see Germany as the de facto leader of Europe. Germany seemingly has abandoned its 20th century aspirations for global domination and enjoys a strong global security partnership, contributing advanced military hardware to promote peace on a global level. Welcome to another Who Would Win It episode of the Infographics Show, where we pit old rivals against each other to determine a modern victor. Today, we're focusing on Germany versus Russia. Who would triumph in a modern conflict? During the 20th century, Germans and Russians found themselves engaged in two world wars, both fueled by Germany's ambition to become the dominant force in Europe. Historically, Germany was known for fielding some of the finest soldiers in the world and excelled in command and leadership during these conflicts. However, their overreaching ambitions ultimately led to their downfall. If Germany had focused its efforts more strategically, it's possible that Europe would still be ruled by Germany today, and the Cold War would have been a conflict between the United States and Germany instead of the Soviet Union. Fortunately for everyone involved, Germany's totalitarian leaders failed their nation and its military in both world wars. Their personal hubris ultimately resulted in the catastrophic defeat of one of history's most formidable fighting forces. Twice. Today, Germany has renounced its imperial ambitions and embraced the cause of peace with an intensity that once fueled its pursuit of war. Far from becoming pacifists, Germany contributes some of the most capable military forces in the world to global conflicts as part of the NATO alliance, committed to maintaining international peace at all costs. Germany is a resilient nation that rebuilt itself after decades of division under Soviet rule and is determined to avoid repeating past mistakes and ensure its people are never again divided as they were during the Cold War. Russia, a nation with a history of hardship, boasts a people as resilient as their harsh climate. They have endured foreign invasions throughout their history and hold a strong disdain for those who invade other nations, quickly seeking revenge after suffering catastrophic losses at the hands of the Germans in World War II. Launching a campaign of extermination, Hitler's Wehrmacht surged into the Soviet Union with the goal of eliminating all perceived undesirables from conquered territories, which encompassed nearly all Russian citizens behind enemy lines. An estimated 15 million civilians perished during the Great Patriotic War, along with over 7 million troops compared to Germany's 4 million casualties. Despite suffering devastating losses that would have crippled any other nation, the Soviet Union not only managed to hold off the powerful Wehrmacht, but also pushed it back into the heart of Germany itself. Throughout the Cold War, the Soviet Union pursued a hardline foreign policy that pitted Soviet communism against the liberal democracies of the West. Having been deeply affected by foreign invasions in both world wars, the Soviet Union quickly annexed Eastern Europe under its control, creating a buffer zone between itself and Western Europe. Unfortunately, Soviet communism was poorly managed and ultimately failed, leading to the collapse of the Soviet Union in '91 and the emergence of the Russian Federation. Despite claiming to be a free democracy, Vladimir Putin has carefully manipulated elections for the past 2 decades, ensuring his continued rule over a nation grappling with turmoil as it struggles to shed the shackles of authoritarianism and embrace a truly democratic process. So, who would emerge victorious in a clash between these modern military heavyweights? Let's find out. The Russian military remains the second most powerful military in the world, trailing only the United States and surpassing China. For decades, the Russian military operated under Stalin's principle that quantity equates to quality, fielding vast numbers of capable, though not cutting-edge, equipment intended to overwhelm smaller, technologically superior NATO forces. This strategy came to a sudden halt in 1991 when the United States and its allies decisively defeated the Iraqi military. At the time, Iraq possessed one of the largest militaries in the world, largely composed of Soviet-made fighters, tanks, and artillery. It also operated under a top-down Soviet-style command structure that stifled individual initiative and relied on direct orders from superior officers. When outnumbered American armored divisions shattered Iraqi defenses while supported by advanced fighter and spy aircraft, Soviet military leadership reportedly declared, "The only way to stop an American armored advance is with nuclear weapons." This posed a significant challenge as the Soviet Union recognized its dependence on nuclear weapons alone was insufficient and the need to fight a conventional war. The collapse of the Soviet Union shortly after plunged the Russian military into a protracted period of financial hardship. Today, Russia fields significantly fewer troops than it once did, prioritizing the quality of its equipment over sheer numbers. The nation continues to develop cutting-edge military technologies, but often lacks the financial capacity to fully equip its military with these advancements. This forces Russia to be selective in its acquisition of new equipment. While its highly capable S-500 air defense systems are undoubtedly the world's best, it has been forced to indefinitely halt its fifth-generation fighter program, potentially leaving it at a strategic disadvantage if the U.S. successfully overcomes the challenges facing its F-35 program. On the ground, Russian forces also struggle with equipment shortages. The highly anticipated T-14 Armata, an exceptional main battle tank, had its planned production run of 2,300 units reduced to just 100. This leaves Russian armored forces relying on roughly 1,000 T-90s and T-80s and primarily on 2,000 T-72s. The T-72 is the same tank that faced off against American Abrams and British Challengers during the Gulf War, where it was decisively defeated, failing to achieve a single kill against Allied tanks. However, the most significant challenge for the Russian military lies in its massive conscript force, with approximately two-thirds of its 1 million-strong military comprised of conscripts. Conscripts, infamous for low morale and inadequate training, are a burden on modern professional militaries. Sadly, Russia has struggled to cultivate a fully volunteer military force, primarily due to the military being viewed as an unattractive career option for Russian youth. With West Germany serving as a frontline buffer against a potential Soviet incursion into Western Europe, Germany invested heavily in its defense for decades, allocating an average of 3% of its total GDP to military spending. However, following reunification and the end of the Cold War, the German military experienced a catastrophic decline, relying on a false sense of security that was rudely shattered by Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014. For nearly 2 decades, the German military was allowed to shrink exponentially, content with only providing support to Allied expeditionary conflicts. But Russia's aggression against Ukraine prompted Germany to reevaluate its military capabilities, recognizing the need to be able to engage in conventional warfare independently without solely relying on its NATO allies. Today, the Bundeswehr is undergoing a period of intense growth and restructuring. After the annexation of Crimea, Germany immediately acknowledged the need to take its own defense more seriously and pledged to allocate at least 2% of its GDP to defense by 2020. However, the German military remains in a precarious state. In 2017, a report by an American think tank revealed that Germany would require at least a month to mobilize a single armored brigade in the event of a Russian invasion of the Baltics, and even then, only at the cost of stripping other units of essential equipment. A full mobilization of the German military could take as long as 3 months, a deeply concerning finding that alarmed Germany's NATO allies. Its air force also appears to be in a similar state of unpreparedness. In the summer of 2018, the Luftwaffe reported that most of its Typhoon jets were not ready for combat operations. For the entire year, none of the German Navy's submarines went to sea, and none of the Luftwaffe's heavy air transports could be deployed due to ongoing repairs. Trainee pilots were also unable to train due to a lack of available aircraft. Severe mismanagement of basic logistics coupled with a 5-year effort to upgrade weapon systems and prepare them for combat have wreaked havoc on the German military. A staggering 21,000 vacancies in officer positions across its armed forces have left the German military with a deficient command and control structure, significantly reducing the effectiveness of its troops in a war against Russia. It's evident that both Russia and Germany face significant challenges within their respective armed forces. But what do the numbers alone tell us? Currently, the Russian military has 113,628 active duty personnel, compared to Germany's 178,741. Russian reservists number 2,500 and 72,500, while Germany has 30,000. These figures seem heavily skewed, but it's crucial to note that the Russian military consists primarily of conscripts with low morale, and Russian leadership harbors significant concerns about mass desertions in the event of war. This implies that Russia would rely on its professional volunteer forces for initial engagements, reserving its conscript forces for rearguard actions and limited combat, potentially leaving as much as 2/3 of its military out of direct fighting. In the air, however, Russia enjoys a substantial advantage, boasting 869 fighters compared to Germany's 122. Russian fighters vary in their level of modernization, but have historically been among the best engineered in the world. And as we've already discussed, Germany cannot guarantee that any of its own fighters would be operational in the event of war. With 1,459 attack aircraft compared to Germany's 178, Russian air forces would possess virtually unrestricted reach into every corner of Germany, capable of inflicting devastating blows on German military and civilian infrastructure. Germany's tank force of 900 would be hard-pressed to defend against an onslaught of 3,000 Russian tanks. While Russia officially claims to have 20,000 tanks, most of these are Cold War relics that would require weeks of refurbishment before being ready for combat and would likely perform poorly in modern warfare. Realistically, Russia would only be able to field around 3,000 operational battle tanks, which would still be more than enough to overwhelm Germany's meager force of 900, most of which are held by reserve units. However, Germany does field the highly capable Leopard 2, which would more than hold its own against Russian T-72s, T-80s, and T-90s. Despite its smaller size, Germany spends $5 billion more on defense than Russia, allocating $49.1 billion versus Russia's $44 billion. This disparity stems from Germany's ongoing efforts to acquire increasing amounts of modern equipment and offset its numerical disadvantages with technological advantages. A significant portion of its defense budget is also dedicated to its fully volunteer force, with conscription being completely phased out in 2014. This makes the German soldier generally more motivated and better trained than his Russian counterpart, even though a lack of non-commissioned officers continues to plague the ranks of the German military. In a war between the two nations, however, Germany's inability to prevent the Russian Air Force from wreaking havoc on the country would lead to a swift defeat of its military. While the war would be costly for the Russian military, we declare Russia the clear winner in this U versus. Quantity truly does possess its own form of quality in this scenario, especially against an opponent whose significant logistical problems have left as much as 40% of its military unprepared for combat operations. Who do you think would win in a real war? Do you agree with our assessment? Why or why not? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, check out some of our other epic matchups in our Who Would Win series. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more great content.